Well, hey there, Susan here. I hope you're having an amazing day. This founder that I am about to interview is absolutely incredible. He is behind several iconic beverage brands, including Four Loko and KOIA and Not Your Father's Root Beer. And you can look at him and go, dang, your latest venture, you're in Starbucks, you're in 7-Eleven, and you could think, I mean, this guy, he has it all together. Well, he is going to share in this episode how not only did he have some legal struggles, there were times where he had severe emotional challenges as well. And he's got a new book out where he chronicles all of the challenges he faced and where he even had to get super clear because he didn't know how he was going to continue on. And so in this episode, you're going to hear about grit, you're going to hear about determination, and you're going to hear what his secret superpower is. So it's my honor and privilege to bring to you this incredible founder and father, Christopher Hunter.
This is Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that brings the no-nonsense truth of what is required to start, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Susan Slack. All right, what is up, Raw and Real Entrepreneurs, wherever you are in the world? I hope you are having an amazing day. And today I happen to be in Scottsdale. My guest is in Miami, and I'm so tempted to sing Going Back to Miami, but I'm not going to do it. So Chris, welcome to the show. We were talking prior to the show about parenthood. We were talking about inspiring young entrepreneurs, and we're going to dive into so many things. But one of the questions I love to ask but the guests, like, what were your first childhood businesses or your first childhood business?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And this is going to be fun. I am that kid that was always an entrepreneur from day one. And I don't know that I knew the term, but I knew that I liked to figure out unique ways to make money. I grew up in a lower middle class, blue collar family in Youngstown, Ohio. I saw what happened when you didn't have money, right? The tension and things that it could create. And so at an early age, I started figuring out unique ways to make it. And so like the earliest one that comes to mind is I would, like many first graders, color in a coloring book. And I think I was told by my mom or somebody, my aunt, that I was really good at it. And then I had great shading and all this stuff. And so I decided, well, I'm going to rip this out and go sell it because clearly somebody wants it. And so I went door to door selling my coloring book pictures in first grade. And that just steamrolled from there. I sold candy on the bus and at school. I sold, knockoff sunglasses and t-shirts and sweatshirts at a flea market. I sold Cutco knives door to door. And it just continued to grow from there. I started my first official company in college. I started a magazine. I started a promotions company. And as any entrepreneur knows, plenty of losses along the way and a couple wins too.
Well, we're going to get into your entrepreneurial career. So it sounds like to me, like you've always had like a side hustle. You've always been entrepreneurial. Do your kids have side hustles?
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's amazing to see. So my kids are 11, 9, and 6, all boys. And so that's a competitive and, energetic household, as you can imagine. We found this amazing school that we love down here in Miami. It's called Centner Academy. And what we love about it is it's my older two boys went to a Waldorf school. If you don't know about that style of teaching, look it up. It was really magical for them as kids. And then we moved here, and this school embraces many of those concepts, but also is progressive. So, they meditate in the morning, they learn about mindfulness, they're learning about crypto and entrepreneurism in the afternoon. And so they do a Shark Tank starting in third grade, where they come up with an idea, they pitch it to us potential investors. Little secret, they all get funded, oddly enough. And then they do a marketplace at school, and they do 2 or 3 of them a year. And so my older two boys have, I'm a beverage entrepreneur. So my oldest did a beverage for his first one. My second son did a ice cream stand for his. My youngest son, who's 6, has not had the opportunity to do that yet. But it's amazing to see how want and desire motivates, because his older two brothers, we empower our kids to manage their own money. There's some requirements around what they save, invest, and spend and give. But within that, as long as it's legal and not against the house rules, they can buy what they want. And the older two boys bought these gel blaster guns. And my younger son wanted one, and he asked us, like, how can we make money? And so we brainstormed, and he came up with the idea that his brothers were going to be playing a hot football game in hot weather on Saturday. And so he created lemonade, and he went person to person and sold it. And then one day he made the money to buy his gel blaster gun. So I would say they have side hustles already going.
I love it. And I think it's so important that we were talking to, like, my son AJ, he just graduated, and I was telling Chris that his degree is already obsolete because of AI, right? So his degree is in design and advertising. And so there we spent 150,000 on this degree. And what does it really mean? And that teaching kids entrepreneurship is I think it's essential, because it's something that if Chris, Hunter, and I were on the corner of like 52nd in Manhattan and we had nada, like by that night, we'd have a roof over our heads. We'd have, food. It's because you have to know how to do it, and the world is changing. So I love that. So Chris, you mentioned beverages. How did that spark happen for you? Because the CPG, consumer packaged goods, is not an easy gig. What I have invested in 2 CPG companies, both in the beverage space, women-led companies. One is Infem Wines, one is Glochi. Like, beverages are tough. Like, how did that start for you?
Yeah, so I guess it probably luckily started with some ignorance on my part. I didn't know how hard it was, so I didn't know to say no to it. If I look back and look, these are long answers, right? And I'll try to shorten them up, but I wrote extensively about all this in my book. But if I look back, what really got me going in beverage was, one, in college, I started a nightclub promotions business. And so, drinking and alcohol were really central to what I was doing and how I was paying my way through college. That's one. Two, around that time, Red Bull was really just launching into the US market. And watching that happen was fascinating. They had reps I went to Ohio State, they had reps in our college town just giving out cases. And of course, since I was the party guy, they were giving me a ton of them, right? And so those things in retrospect make total sense why I got into beverage. I moved to Chicago. I had no job. I ran up a ton of debt. And out of necessity, I had to figure out something to do. And the first thing I figured out to do was go work for like a hail damage storm chasing company, because they made good money fast and there was low barrier to entry. But I'm afraid of heights, and that was never a career. So I bugged a contact I had made in Ohio that lived in Chicago. I bugged him every day until he gave me a job working for his startup vodka company. And once I got in, I learned the beverage industry, the alcohol industry specifically, and it just steamrolled from there. I saw opportunities because of the world I was living in. So that's really what propelled me into beverages.
Oh, well, I'm afraid of heights as well. That's
Yeah.
the first thing. And my question for you is, what alcohol did you mix in your Red Bull?
So we sold this vodka called, it was a really bad name. It was called Players Extreme Vodka. And there was a cherry flavor, and we sold it mixed in with Red Bull as a cherry bomb shot. And that was primarily where I was selling the bulk of that flavor of product. And so, yeah, Players Extreme Cherry Vodka.
Oh, okay. Okay. And full confession, I've maybe had a Red Bull once. I've never had Red Bull with alcohol. I can't do caffeine afternoon, so I don't know what kind of mess I would be. I'd probably hallucinate. So not a good thing for me.
I get it.
So, Chris, you mentioned debt. So I just had Nick Fogel on the show. He had $250,000 in student loan debt from going to law school. He never practiced law. He went into entrepreneurship. Oftentimes we hear about entrepreneurs who have debt coming into a venture. Like, how much debt did you have?
So I had racked up, probably, keep in mind, this is the early 2000s. I had probably racked up, $30,000, $40,000 in credit card debt, not just long-term debt. Plus I had student loans. So you know how that works. That was almost something that I couldn't come out of, right? I was fortunate in one sense. I had an uncle who said, I'll essentially refinance this for you. I'll pay the credit card debt off and you pay me back plus interest. And I did and paid that off. So that really was helpful. I'll tell you, there was a pivotal moment though. My now wife, but she was my girlfriend at the time, was living in Chicago. And I had this confidence, maybe bordering on arrogance after my college days. And I was not going to go get a entry-level startup or an entry-level job for a big corporation. It just wasn't going to happen. And that mentality led me to being broke with a ton of debt to the point where I woke up in my girlfriend's house one day and didn't know how I was going to pay rent. And to her credit, I woke up the next day and there was a check on the nightstand, and that's how I paid rent. But again, that is a motivator. I said I gotta get it together, man. And so I started by getting a job, which I didn't want to do, and then built my company, which is now, a good sized company, as a side hustle. While I had that job, I was being paid. The way I looked at it is I was being paid to learn an industry, and I'd be foolish not to take advantage of that. And so those 2 years that I worked for that startup vodka company, I learned a ton and made enough contacts that I could launch something in that space. So, I did all that before I quit my job and started something.
Yeah, and I want to unpack that for the listeners just for a second, because in Chris's book, the you know he lays out his story, his vulnerabilities. It's huge, and I want everyone to read it, because you cannot be an entrepreneur by yourself. And you said you had confidence bordering on arrogance, and I want to pause for a minute so this really lands for the listeners. We're talking credit card debt, which is high interest debt, student loan debt, which you can't default on. So a significant amount of debt. Chris is working full time and he's doing his side hustle. So we look at Chris a lot. The rate for startups to fail is about 90%. And I'm asked all the time, what kind of startups are going to make it? What are going to fail? I've interviewed 400 founders. I'm a multi-time founder. I always bet on the founder. I think ideas are like, there are a million ideas out there. There are a million concepts, but is that person gritty? Are they going to do what it takes when the chips are against them to really get themselves out of that corner? Right. Yeah. And so you work for 2 years and I'm sure it wasn't easy. Like, did you have some wall kicking moments? Like, okay, so you got your girlfriend, you got a full-time job, you got a side hustle, you're still paying off debt. What was the hardest thing about that time?
I think the hardest thing about that time was having patience. Like I knew that I was never going to work for someone long term. I was not long-term employable, at least in my own mind, and I was okay with that. And so getting to where I wanted to be took patience, and that was tough. But I look back at the comment you made about grit, and I read this study that I thought was super interesting around, and I applied it to my kids on a range of 0 to 10, 0 being you had the worst life you can imagine and nothing was in your favor, and 10 being you had everything with a silver spoon and nothing could go wrong. Between 0 and 2 and 8 and 10 had the same failure rate in life, however you want to classify that. So the point was that middle ground where you had to have some grit and had to overcome some things was really imperative to long-term success. And so I grew up in a situation where, on the lower side of that scale, where there were plenty of obstacles created for me or that were in life for me. Fortunately, my kids are on the higher end of that scale, and we find ourselves creating some obstacles for them to overcome so that they don't have everything handed to them, because we want to set them up for long-term success. And I say that because I look back and I remember specific times in my life that things worked out that literally propelled me forward and gave me the confidence to go do other things. I remember in third grade, I moved to a new neighborhood. I had to take the Iowa test, which was the standardized test at the time. I performed really well on it. And so I was then suddenly considered gifted, and I got to go into these gifted classes. Well, when I think back, all those gifted classes were conversations and critical thinking. There was nothing that special about them. I just wasn't forced to sit in a desk and listen and regurgitate what the teacher told me. That was a pivotal moment for me. When I was told repeatedly year after year that I was in the gifted class, I started to believe I was gifted. And then I was more confident in going out to do something and that I would figure it out. And so I can't overemphasize the value of that grit for kids.
Yeah, that's huge. And you mentioned patience too, because there's a testing every entrepreneur, like entrepreneurial failure. I think one of the things I look at, someone asked me, yesterday, what characteristics do you look for in an entrepreneur? I'm like, I love former athletes.
Yeah.
Like, you know how to push past pain. You know how to go and get the job done, how to perform when it's important. Like, there are things that I look for, the commitment, someone who can commit to something. So you have these characteristics that you honed.
Hmm.
And then you start Four Loko and you have this meteoric rise and a regulatory smackdown. So
Yeah.
like what talk about a little bit. I know you've spoken about in so many interviews how you founded the company, but I want to dive right to the moment where it's like the oh crap moment. Like, what the heck is going on here? And
Well, I think on the patience topic, like many people know Four Loko is the meteoric rise, and it's true it was, but we were in business for multiple years before that on the verge of bankruptcy every year, hiring people, letting them go, going without paychecks, whatever it may be. And then when we hit on Four Loko, it was this meteoric rise. And then a very quick, regulatory smackdown, as you mentioned. And I look back at that and I say I got my PhD in crisis management through that experience. It was definitely a eye-opening, experience to where we had done everything we thought right. We followed the rules as they were laid out, and then the rules changed for us. And so it was very much another practice in patience of asking a lot of questions, trying to understand what the root of these regulations and concerns was. And ultimately, what we determined is it didn't make logical sense. But we had to play by the rules that were now being changed, and so we did. And so it was a very intense time. But what I've also found out about myself, both through behavioral assessments like DISC, telling me about myself,
yeah,
and then through experience, is I thrive in chaos. And so there was a lot of clarity for me that others may not have during a time like that. And those high highs and those low lows create a level of focus and intensity that is can't be matched in normal day business. So you learn a lot about yourself. We came out the other side with a really strong company, and that company is better than it's ever been. But it was a learning experience for sure.
that I had Jeremy Delk on the show. And so Jeremy was rated by the FBI, like he was doing like compounding pharmacy
Oh yeah.
and and they were just like they were growing so fast, Chris, that they weren't paying attention to the regulations and the things that are changing. And I just step into a mentorship role for a moment. And what would you say to an entrepreneur in terms of being able to look around corners before you're going down the road and you're driving 150 miles an hour? Like, how do you anticipate the turns,
Yeah.
like
So in
looking back
retrospect,
in time? Yeah.
I don't know that it would have changed anything. I mean, it ultimately got us to where we were. But if I were thinking through things we may have been able to do better, one of them was alcohol is a highly regulated industry. Getting more ingrained in the industry, the trade groups, the regulating bodies, and working collaboratively with them from the beginning might have been valuable. It may have saved us some headache. A lot of money it would have saved us, but it also may have made us not do things in terms of continuing to put the product out that was legal, that solidified our business for the long haul. I would say that when you're going at 150 miles an hour, it's really easy to just bolt things on and not focus on culture, not focus on sustainable processes. And I think had we, if I were running that race again, I would find a way to implement some of those so that the rocket ship ride will eventually end or will plateau. And so we would have been better prepared for when that happened. Um, those would be the two biggest ones. I would say, the other thing is remain focused. We got to a point, and I'll speak for myself, not my partners, but I got to a point where it felt like I could do no wrong. Anything that we came out with was taking off, was working. And so I started to get distracted and thinking about other businesses and other things that I could do rather than focusing on this tiger we had by the tail and really kind of solidifying it.
Mm. That's huge. And did you have someone in your life at that point who's kind of sat you down and said, "Hey, it's time to like think differently"?
You know, the first time I would say that really happened was I met a guy that I wanted to partner with his company to bring an alcohol collab brand to life. And he was the CEO or president of a company that had sold billions of dollars worth of liquor brands to strategics. And I asked him how he did it. And he said, I was ill-equipped for my position when I got the position, but there was this guy who coached me through it. And he's the only reason I was successful. And so, of course, I said, well, I got to meet that guy. And he introduced me to him. He did this disc behavioral assessment. He coached me. And that was the first time I realized, like, one, some of the things that were really second nature to me that were unique and special because we only know what we know, right? What comes
Yeah.
natural to us may not come natural to everyone. So that was really valuable. And the second was realizing that we needed to think a little bit ahead about, you know, look, we were a three-headed monster, right? There were three co-founders, equal owners, and no real defined roles and hierarchy. And he said, "Hey, this is going to become a problem at some point," and ultimately it did. So he was the first person I think that helped guide me. And I would say that if I could go back, I would get a coach or a mentor much earlier.
Yeah, that's huge. Every entrepreneur I know who's had an exit, who's grown a company to a nine-figure beyond valuation, or in your case, like multiple nine-figure annual sales, they have a coach, they have a therapist, right? They have a team because it can be a very lonely journey. And
Yeah.
that's why I said it's so I read books, like I'm an avid reader. And here's a full confession in front of thousands of our closest friends is my youngest daughter, Emery, and I, we love Barnes and Noble, like old school, like we need to have physical books in our
Yeah,
hands. We're
love
not
it.
going to read them on tablets. And I read like 3 to 4 books a month easily. So I audio
Um,
read them, I physically read them, and I can't, we need that because we don't have all the answers. And speaking of, so you say, okay, well, we're gonna do KOIA. And that is the book. There's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's talking about, you're nodding. Chris is nodding if you're listening. And if you're seeing on YouTube, he's nodding. But if you're not, he's nodding. And so just I'm going to frame the question a little bit for people who aren't familiar. So the premise of the book is the blue ocean is you're in a market where there's not a lot of competition and you can go in there and you can acquire clients and it's great. The red ocean, the sharks are out for blood. It's a lot of competition. It costs you more money for market penetration. You usually in a red ocean, people are going to spend more on sales and in customer acquisition costs and so forth. So you launch KOIA in, I'm not going to call it a red ocean of plant-based drinks, but let's call it a pink ocean. Like what, and I've always been, a fan of what you've done and to look and go, he launched this in like, this is not a new market.
right.
There were sharks in the water. So what made you think this is the direction I want to head?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I remember as I was transitioning away from Fusion and looking at what I was going to do next, I remember talking to some people and I was considering a bunch of different things and I was considering another alcohol product and it would have been an alcoholic tea. And they said, yeah, you should go into that. It would have been easy, right? Theoretically, nothing's ever easy, but theoretically it would have been easy. And I just felt drawn to this idea of this plant-based protein drink because it organically aligned with me and my lifestyle. So what had happened between the inception of Four Loko and my life at this point was I had grown up, I was older, I was married, I had two kids at the time. My wife's a nutritionalist, so our definition of health around eating specifically and drinking became very different. And my second son was born dairy intolerant. We didn't know it at the time, but we figured it out, or lactose intolerant. And so we became a dairy-free household. So keep in mind, this is 2014-ish. This is before Oatly and Impossible Burger and Califia
Yeah.
Farm, all these things. And so this idea of plant-based was interesting because vegan to me was very much like an exclusive. I was never going to be vegan. I didn't believe in it. That wasn't aspirational for me. And it felt like if a product was marketed as vegan, then it wasn't for me. But this idea of plant-based was very inclusive. Like I can eat a steak, a high quality steak one night, and I can drink a koi in the morning and not feel like it's not a fit. So that was intriguing to me. So those two things. And then the third was I had invested in what I'll call the proof of concept of KOIA. It was called Raw Nature 5. Essentially, it was the same. It was a plant-based protein drink. Um, Bad name, bad package, but it got a little bit of buzz in about 20 stores in Chicago. And it's a tough category, as you mentioned. It's perishable, so it's even more difficult and expensive. And so there was an opportunity for me to come in and essentially fund and co-found and pivot this company, which I decided to take advantage of. Now, I will say, I thought my first goal was I will be a co-founder and a 1 year interim CEO. And here I am 7 years later, still in the CEO seat because it's never as fast or efficient as you plan on it being. I raised money really quickly in this venture, and I felt an obligation to my investors to, take it across the finish line, whatever that means. So, to answer your question directly, I think it's just like an alignment with what I'm doing and building to my personal lifestyle and an easy understanding of what it is.
And that's what it seems like your life's opus in terms of your work is very much of whatever you're building is a reflection of where you are in your life right now. You're not the college kid drinking a case of Red Bull a week, right? You're a dad. You're like so proud of the boys and what they're doing in their endeavors. You've learned your lessons, and you're also at a different time and stage in your life, and you're looking at health, you're looking at longevity. And the reason I mentioned the red ocean is because KOIA made some very significant market penetration. And these are not easy deals to get into. Starbucks, as an example.
Right.
And what is one of the deals that from the outside might have looked impossible? You don't even have to name the customer, but you managed to get it done. And how did you get it done?
Yes, I think patience, tenacity, and clarity in terms of who that partner is, what that partnership looks like, and why it's valuable to both sides. And so I will use Starbucks as an example because I think it's a good one. We always felt that KOIA would be a great fit for Starbucks because people are going there for something on the go, relatively quick, right? Often skewed towards the beginning of the day. So breakfast on the go would make total sense. That's one of the core usage occasions for KOIA. We also knew that there was this trend towards not only plant-based, but low sugar. Many of the legacy drinks at Starbucks didn't have that option. So we always felt like this would be a perfect fit. It took 7 years for us to get that opportunity. And we launched, as you mentioned, in Starbucks nationwide in October of last year. But then where the real value came in was when we uncovered the truths behind the partnership. So a vast majority of Starbucks revenue is driven from sales behind the bar, right? Their coffees, their lattes, all that stuff. The stuff in front of the bar is a nice to have, and it's like a complementary product, but it will never move the needle as much as behind the bar. Well, what we discovered is there's an opportunity to merge those worlds. And so we noticed this trend. It's on social media. It's hashtag Profi, protein coffee. And it was gaining a ton of momentum, 250 million views. And people were using our product in it as well as others. So we went to Starbucks and we were talking about how we could collaborate. And this was a great opportunity. You can order 2 shots of espresso in a venti cup of ice. You can buy a KOIA, you can pour it over, low maintenance or low lift for the person working behind the bar, upsell for the consumers and for the retailer themselves, and gives the consumer a new option. And so I think unique angles and creative kind of approaches to partnerships really matter. And I think that's why we've been successful there. But how did it happen? A lot of it was patience. And it was also talking to all of the investors and advisors that we have around the table and telling them what we are trying to accomplish. Because ultimately what happened is one of our investors had some relationships with people inside of Starbucks who got the conversation started for us, helped us navigate who we should even be speaking to get the ball rolling, right? And sometimes that's the hardest part.
Well, and to that point, the statistic is founders that speak to their advisors at least once a month are 38% more profitable for as operators than those who don't.
Wow.
And so that, that's a credit to you to say, hey, this is a vision we have. We don't necessarily know how to get there, but we're going to leverage, or obviously a high D in the disc, but we're obviously going to leverage these relationships and see who do you know. And lastly, I want to switch gears to the book. You have been so vulnerable in the book, from selling drugs to ayahuasca to, to put yourself out there, especially at a pivotal time when you're building a valuation in a company. My question for you is, a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do that. What made you decide that now was the right time?
Yeah, great question. I had casually gotten the comment over years of, oh, you should write a book, but I never took put weight into that. Back in 2020, I was talking with a friend, like one of our really close family friends, and she was struggling with something, and I shared a story. I try not to give advice. I try to share stories that may be relevant. And I shared a story, and she said, oh, that really helped me, and you should really write a book. And under that heading of, hey, maybe your stories will help somebody, I found inspiration to say, let's do this. Let's bring it to life. I will say that it was a 4-year project, way longer than I expected. There was a lot of therapy involved.
That's a theme in your life, brother.
Yeah, much longer than I expected. Yeah.
That's your next book title.
Yeah. I think you're right. Gosh, I'm glad you noticed that theme. Now I can try to change it. But I almost didn't put it out. And then because there's a lot of self-questioning about what you just said. Is it the right time? Should I be this vulnerable? Should I expose myself? Is it going to have a negative impact on the companies? And ultimately, what I decided after meeting a kindred spirit here in Miami and him reading it, he shared that it helped him. And so I set the goal of, if this story, any one of them that's in the book, can help any person, then I've succeeded. And within a week, somebody shared that, one of the stories had helped them in a family situation. And so that was the reason to really put it out. I questioned it, but you have to think about these things. My kids will one day read this book and they will learn those things. My parents or my in-laws would read this book and have, but the reality is that I'm not perfect, and none of us are. And we don't act like we're perfect to our kids. And we just felt like it was probably a good example to highlight, that fact, and give ourselves and them a little permission to, you make mistakes, you learn from them, and you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to, and kudos to you, because that it takes guts to do. And a lot of people will write a book after an exit or an IPO or something, and you're still in it, you're still operating, you're still doing it. And I want to thank you. And so I want to encourage everyone to get Blackout Punch. Everyone on this entrepreneurial journey, as I said, you can't go it alone. It just as, Chris has shared, not only can you not go it alone, but you actually, it might take longer. Patience has been a big theme of this, this particular show, Chris.
Yeah.
But, and I want to wish you every success. I'm a KOIA fan. And I think that what you have done in a market, is just incredible, and to be so resilient. And a lot of people would have given up and either pivoted or taken a job or something, and you've just kept on going. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And as a KOIA fan, you should know, our existing product as it shows up is a perishable refrigerated product. We listened to our customers and our fans, and the number one request was, how do I buy it in bulk? And the number 2 request was, how do I get it delivered? And so this month we'll be launching our first multi-pack on Amazon. So you'll have to check it out. We'll send you some over.
Absolutely. Yes, I probably spend a lot of money on Amazon. That's why I buy shares in Amazon, because I need to feel validated that I'm like getting some kind of benefit from it.
Smart woman.
Well, thank you again, Chris, for being here. And to all the listeners, drop us drop a share on social media, give us a 5-star review, make sure you are subscribed to these episodes. If you have a comment about this episode, you can always go to susansly.com. I read all your comments. And with that, God bless, go rock your day, and I will see you in the next episode.
Well, hey there. If you are listening, I hope you had an amazing experience hearing Christopher's story, and I hope you ordered his book, Blackout Punch. I know that I did. And if you are watching on YouTube for Startup Diaries, I just want to welcome you to this episode. And today I recorded 2 shows. So yes, I'm wearing the exact same thing I was wearing before. And it's been a day. And today I want to talk about, in this diary, handling challenges that you're not expecting. So as an entrepreneur, you go, okay, well, this is what I want to create, and this is what I want to build, and I have a plan, and it's all well and good. And until something disrupts you. And so I want to talk about today the difference between goals and your vision, because they're not the same thing. So as an entrepreneur, it's important to have a vision. The vision is, what is it that you're creating, and why are you creating it? Who is it going to impact? What changes is it going to make? And you don't have all of the pieces. That is why it is called a vision. It's like a dream. You don't necessarily know how you are going to accomplish it. You just know that there is a bigger destination for you to get to. And in thinking about that, thinking about things like Tesla, Elon Musk getting into electronic vehicle space, he had a vision of what Tesla could be. SpaceX, he had a vision for what that company could be. Steve Jobs had a vision for what Apple could be, what the Macintosh could be when he was working on that project. If you haven't read Walter Isaacson's biography, Steve Jobs, I highly recommend it as an entrepreneur. Even friends of mine who've started various companies, they all have a vision. And then as you have your vision, you begin to set these goals about how you're going to get there. And in the engineering world, we might call them sprints. It's like, okay, where do I want to be? I'm at sprint 0. Okay, where do I want to go to next? And then you get into the aspect of how you're going to get there. If your vision is clear, when you are derailed because you're in a sprint and you have a goal and something happens, you will figure out a way to circumnavigate around that. And you know what? Guess what? You'll probably even figure out an even better way to get there. But when you're in a place where you're so focused on the goals and you've lost sight of your vision, that's where your company becomes exhausting, because you're so focused on the tactics and these minor steps that you lose sight of that thing that got you up in the morning and that gave you that in French we'd say that joie de vivre, the joy of living, that gave you that excitement. And when you lose sight of vision, there's a saying, without vision, the people perish. When you lose sight of that vision, if you have employees, if you have customers, your family members who are watching you do this, they all suffer. Your job as an entrepreneur is to be the chief visionary officer. And I know sometimes in large companies that the original founder will bring in a chief visionary officer because they're feeling flat, or maybe they've already accomplished their vision and they're feeling a little stuck. They're in a success coma, and that's perfectly okay. But if you're starting a business, you've got a newer business, you've only been at it for a few years, reconnect with your vision if you're feeling a little flat. And I know for myself that with what we're building at the Pause, I have such a clear-cut vision of how it's going to make an impact and what it's going to be. And then when I get into the engineering meetings and I hear things like, oh, we can't do that in V1, or this isn't going to work, I almost tune it out, because I will challenge the team to go back and say, what is the alternate way? What is the plan B? We are still creating this vision, because there are so many women out there, millions and millions of women who want this particular piece of technology that we're going to build, and the impact and the end result and what it can accomplish. And so stand on your vision, my friend. That's what I want to say to you. Like, it's hard. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to have wall kicking moments. You're going to have times you want to like pull your hair out. Like I'm 51 years old. I probably, yes, I color my hair, whatever. My hair is probably really, really gray beneath all of this because, there are so many stressful times as an entrepreneur, but reconnecting with the vision. And sometimes I'll just say, sometimes for me, I need to just like put on music and go for a hike or go for a walk or go do something quietly by myself and reconnect with that vision so I can reground myself, because as the CEO, I am the chief visionary officer, and if I'm faltering on the vision, then the whole team will too. So that's my diary for you this week. And if you're on YouTube, drop a comment below. I want to see your comments. And if this is helpful, I'd love for you to share. These diaries just come from my heart because they're really something that, I was looking for, especially as a female founder. I wasn't seeing it out there. It isn't all perfect. The road is messy and bumpy, but oh my gosh, it's worth it. And so please comment below and like and subscribe to the channel.